Welcome to Piggy Bank Times.
Here's something that might genuinely surprise you. In over 250 years of American history, there's been exactly 1 year when the US government owed nothing to anyone. Since then, the country has built the largest economy on Earth without ever hitting zero debt again. And it's not just governments stuck in this loop. American households collectively owe $18.8 trillion. Some of the most profitable companies on the planet borrow money on purpose, even when they don't need the cash. And globally, total debt just crossed $348 trillion, more than 3 times the size of the entire world economy. So here's the real question. If debt is this universal, why does it feel almost impossible for a regular person to escape it, while governments and corporations carry debt bigger than entire economies and never collapse? Let's break down how debt actually works for countries, companies, and you, and expose the parts of the system nobody bothers explaining. Let's get started. Section 1. What is debt? Really? Let's start with the basics, because debt secretly means 3 very different things depending on who's borrowing. National debt, also called sovereign or public debt, is what a government owes, mostly through selling bonds to investors, other countries, and its own citizens. Corporate debt is what a business owes, usually through bank loans or corporate bonds. And personal debt is what you owe, your mortgage, car loans, student loans, credit cards. Underneath, all 3 work identically. Someone lends money now for a promise of repayment later, plus interest. What differs is the punishment for breaking that promise. You default, your credit score collapses, and collectors start calling. A company defaults, its stock craters, sometimes into bankruptcy. A country defaults, and things get far messier, which we'll get into later. So why does literally everyone keep borrowing? Quick fact, the only time in American history the national debt hit zero was January 1835, under President Andrew Jackson, who paid it off entirely by selling government-owned land. Within 2 years, the resulting real estate bubble collapsed, triggering the Panic of 1837, one of the worst depressions in US history. The US has never been debt-free since. Going to zero wasn't the safe move everyone assumed it would be. Why do countries actually borrow? Governments borrow for one basic reason. Tax revenue rarely covers everything they want to spend. That shortfall is a budget deficit, and borrowing fills the gap. But it's not only about shortfalls. Borrowing lets governments build infrastructure now instead of waiting decades to save up, respond instantly to emergencies like pandemics or wars, and refinance old debt coming due, essentially taking a new loan to pay off an old one. Here's the part that surprises most people. Countries almost never actually pay off their debt in full. They just roll it over again and again indefinitely, as long as the economy keeps growing and lenders keep trusting them. Quick fact, the US government hasn't repaid the actual principal on its national debt in living memory. It just issues brand new bonds every day to pay off the ones that come due. Structurally, this looks a lot like paying old investors with new investors' money. The key difference is a government can also tax an entire economy to back its promises, which is exactly why the system has lasted over 2 centuries without collapsing, even though the debt itself never disappears. Why do profitable companies choose to borrow? Here's something that surprises people. Some of the most profitable companies on Earth carry billions in debt on purpose, not because they need the cash, but because debt is a strategy. When a company needs money, it has 2 choices: sell shares, giving up a piece of ownership and future profits forever, or borrow and pay it back with interest, keeping full ownership intact. Debt is often the cheaper, smarter option, especially when rates are low. But here's where it gets less innocent. Many large corporations borrow specifically to buy back their own stock. Buying back shares reduces the number of shares in the market, which mathematically boosts earnings per share and share price, even if the underlying business didn't actually grow. Some companies use borrowed money to make their stock look better on paper without making the company itself better. Layer in a wave of new borrowing to fund AI infrastructure and data centers, and it's no surprise global corporate debt is now approaching $100 trillion. Quick fact, right now an estimated 15% of companies in the Russell 3000, the index covering almost the entire US public stock market, don't earn enough profit to cover their own interest payments. These are nicknamed zombie companies. Not bankrupt, not thriving, they simply exist, borrowing fresh money every year just to survive another one. As long as rates stay low, they can keep this up almost indefinitely. The moment rates climb, a chunk of them collapse all at once. Why you're in debt, and why the system makes it so hard to escape. Now let's get personal, because this is where debt stops being abstract. Homes, cars, and college now cost more than most people can realistically save for, which is why US mortgage debt sits at $13.19 trillion and auto loan debt at $1.69 trillion. But the real trap is credit cards. Americans owe $1.25 trillion combined on credit cards, at an average interest rate of 21%. Pay only the minimum each month, and most of that payment goes straight to interest, not the balance, which is why a debt that could be cleared in 2 or 3 years of real payments can instead drag on for over a decade. And here's the part almost nobody explains to you. The system isn't exactly built to help you escape. Your credit score, the number that decides whether you can rent an apartment or get approved for a loan, can actually drop when you pay off and close old accounts, since it shortens your average account age and available credit. Miss payments, and your debt usually doesn't just sit there, it gets sold off. Quick fact: when you fail to pay a debt, banks and credit card companies routinely sell it to collection agencies for just 4 to 8 cents on every dollar you owe. So if you owe $1,000, a collector may have paid as little as $40 for the legal right to chase you for the full amount. This recycled debt is so common it has its own nickname, zombie debt. It gets bought, sold, and pursued for years, sometimes over a decade. So is all this debt actually dangerous? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Whether debt is dangerous depends almost entirely on who's holding it and who it's owed to. Take Japan, whose national debt sits at roughly 230 to 250% of its GDP, more than double the size of its whole economy. By textbook standards, that should be a crisis. It isn't, because most of that debt is owed internally, to Japanese banks, pension funds, and its own central bank, not foreign lenders who could panic and demand repayment. Compare that to Sri Lanka, which defaulted on $51 billion in external debt in 2022 because it borrowed heavily from foreign creditors it eventually couldn't keep paying. Same math, completely different outcome, because of who was owed. For companies, the danger isn't debt itself. It's whether profit growth outpaces interest costs. The moment it doesn't, you get zombie companies waiting to collapse. And for you personally, the same principle plays out at your kitchen table. Debt that helps you build something, a home, an education, a business, tends to pay for itself. Debt that just covers today's expenses at 21% interest almost never does. Quick fact: an estimated 15 million Americans currently have medical debt sitting in collections, and studies suggest medical bills contribute to roughly 2/3 of personal bankruptcy filings in the US, even though it's rarely the sole reason someone files. Unlike a car or a credit card purchase, nobody chooses to go into medical debt, which is exactly why many economists argue it shouldn't be treated the same way as other consumer debt. So why is literally everyone in debt? Because debt isn't proof that something's broken. It's how modern economies, businesses, and people afford things too expensive to pay for upfront. Governments borrow to build the future today instead of decades from now. Companies borrow because it's often cheaper than giving away ownership. And you borrow because life's biggest expenses rarely wait until you've saved enough. The real difference between the ones that thrive with debt and the ones that collapse under it was never about whether they borrowed. It's about whether that money built something worth more than it cost to borrow and who was left holding the risk if it didn't. Now, here's something we haven't covered yet. If borrowing money and paying interest can bury you in debt, what happens when you flip the equation and interest starts working for you instead? That's exactly what we're covering in our next video. How compound interest creates millionaires. Once you see the math, you'll understand why some people build fortunes doing almost nothing at all. If you found this useful, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.